How much do I have relative to you, relative to that person? So in a world where things tend to get better for most people, not everybody, but we tend to get richer over the generations. Well, if you're just comparing yourself to your peers, then if you get richer, but your peers do as well, you went nowhere. And so that's the thing. That's why you can look at, the average median income adjusted for inflation has doubled since our grandparents' generation.
Really?
Adjusted for inflation. But we don't feel any better off at all. Because now, look, we're living in bigger houses, driving nicer cars, but so are our peers. So relative to them, we've gone nowhere. And you can easily imagine a world in which our grandkids are living twice as well as us. And they don't feel any better off either.
And that's all based on comparison?
It's all because you're comparing. And it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Like, it doesn't matter how many resources I have. What matters is that I have more than you, more than the next guy.
Really?
There's that joke about, like, there's two hikers being chased by a bear. And then one of the guys starts running. And his friend says, "You idiot, you can't outrun a bear." And his friend says, "I don't need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you."
Wow.
And that's money too. That's what it is. And so it really is, it's a sad thing to ponder, that you can live in a world where everything gets better and you don't appreciate any of it because you expected all of it. But it's happened forever. General social comparison.
Really?
And I mean, there's the Chris Rock joke where he says if Bill Gates woke up with Oprah's money, he'd jump out the window. Because who is a billionaire comparing himself to? Other billionaires. That's it. And like, I've also thought about the minimum wage in Major League Baseball, I think is $500,000 a year. By any metric, a lot of money. But do you think the guy who's playing for the Yankees making $500K feels like he's crushing it?
No.
No, he's playing with all of his peers who are making 10, 20, 30 million a year. So even if by any definition he's in the tippy top of income, you don't feel like it. The top things that make people broke, number one, the most important, this might seem like a cop-out of an answer, it's they don't have enough luck. I mean, that's so much of it. I know so many people who would disagree with that statement. So if you do disagree with that, I get it. But I think, like I said earlier, in any kind of extreme success, even mine, and I would venture to say yours too, if you're really honest about connecting the dots in the past, you would say that there's this thing that happened to me that I never planned on. I did not strategize this. It just kind of happened to me. As I said, even if that thing is you were born in the right era.
Right.
And so that's a big part of it that I think is too easy to ignore. The second is, I think, some form of short-termism, whatever it is. I heard this great story from Mr. Beast recently where he said when people who have YouTube channels come to him for advice, and I'm sure a lot of them do, he tells everybody the same thing. He says, go make 100 videos and then come back to me. And he said that 99 of those people will give up before they make 100 videos. And the person who actually makes it to 100 doesn't need his advice anymore. Doesn't need to
go back, yeah.
And so I think but the fact that 99 of them gave up, what you're really getting paid for is to put up with uncertainty and pain. And most people they realize that they're going to cry uncle sooner than they thought. And that's okay. I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of.
Right.
But the people who don't make it are the ones or the people who do make it are the ones who are just like, I have such a high tolerance for pain. Mm-hmm. I've heard this about Navy SEALs too, that when Navy SEALs start, you got the big, burly, 6'4", bulging guys. And then you got the skinny little guys who are like 5'7" and kind of pudgy. There is no telling early on which one of those people are going to make it, because what actually is going to help you to make it, to actually get to the finish line, is just your tolerance for pain.
That's it, man.
And the scrawny guy might have a super tolerance for pain. I remember when Obama met the Navy SEALs who killed bin Laden, he had this comment where he was like, I was stunned how ordinary
they just look like average dudes. Yeah.
He said half of them could have been like high school principals.
Exactly.
But their tolerance for pain was off the chart, and that's why they got where they were. And I think that's a great analogy for people who make it in business and investing in what is patience versus stubbornness.
Right.
Maybe it's like, no, keep going and you'll get there, versus like, hey, this isn't your thing. You should quit and give up.
When do we know that?
I think with hindsight is when we know that. I'm not sure there's actually a good way to know it. And I think there have been things in my life where I was stubborn and not patient. There have been other things where I look back and I'm like, oh, I was appropriately patient. But other things, it's like, man, I wish I would have kind of quit before that, particularly like different styles of writing. I'm definitely a worst case scenario thinker. And I definitely, including recently this week, can become kind of wrapped up in stress and anxiety.
Really?
Which I think virtually everyone listening to this has some degree of that. Mine's probably a little bit above average. But definitely when I look back, if I could tell myself something 20 years ago, if I go back to 20-year-old Morgan and say something, I would be like, it's all going to work out. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun all the time, but it's all going to work out. And I look back at most of my adult life and I'm like, man, I wish I had just lightened up a little bit.
Really?
I was, including, like I said, this week, wake up at 2 a.m. fretting about something. And to extent, I think that's good, because I think without an appropriate level of, like, stress is a motivator. And stress is like, hey, there's a problem. How can I fix it? How can I nip this in the bud? So some stress is great, but of course you can overdo it. And that's my weakness, is blowing things out of proportion.